Welcome, everybody, back to Segal Talks here at the Martin E. Segal Theater Center, the Graduate Center, CUNY, in New York City at the City University. It's the end of week 4. We reacted fast at the Segal Center, as we do often, and we created a series so we could hear voices from artists and workers in the field of theater and performance, and to tune in how they are experiencing the moment, what they are thinking, what is on their mind, how they're influenced by the moment, and what the future might bring, should bring, will bring, and what is the way they deal with a situation that's unprecedented, especially, of course, also in New York City. While we are talking, people are in hospitals under respirators, people are dying. We have more dead people than countries in the world, or most of them. So something went really, really wrong. We just had a call with South Africa where Basel shows that things are looking kind of okay. The government is doing the right things, we trust them. And so it's stunning things. We heard from India where 500,000 people left on foot, New Delhi trying to get out, some prepared to walk 1,000 kilometers. We heard from Egypt, where the government offered $15 for an artist for the next 3-4 months as a support, and they had to call into one national hotline where there is one phone number only and fill out 10 pages. We heard from Germany and France, where the situation is different. It's supported, but everybody is missing what makes life life. When we know when we are alive, when a stone is a stone and white is white and black is black, we know that when we look at the stage. And one of the artists, contemporary global artists, who gives us meaning on stage, who reworks the classic, but also reacted right away to his own country and to his situation in the US, where he studied, is Guillermo Calderón from Chile. His country went through tremendous changes, has seen many, many things we have never experienced in America or in Europe, might be closer to quarantine. When he grew up, then is now, and things have changed there, and they are changing again. So we are tuning in now to Latin America. It's been a while. We should have done it earlier. Lula Arias will come soon. We had contact with Sabine Berman from Mexico. Lula, of course, from Argentina. But Guillermo, welcome to Segal Talks.
Thank you so much for having me.
No, really, it's a big honor to have you here. You have been at the Segal, you have been in New York. You actually also studied for a while at the Graduate Center. I didn't even know that at the time you were here. You came to our events. Mm-hmm. You worked with Antje Oegel a lot, who connected us also to you at the Public, with Oscar Eustace, who's going to be on next week, with Tony Torn together. Guillermo, where are you now and what time is it?
It's the same time as New York City. This is noon, and I'm in Santiago, Chile.
So this is where you live, their home is at the moment?
Yes, I've been staying here for the last year or so, yeah.
So tell us a bit, what's going on in Santiago de Chile?
Well, maybe I should start with the dead. We're hitting maybe 180 this weekend, and there are people diagnosed with the virus is hitting around 12,000, which is acceptable, I guess, because it means that the health system is not collapsing. But of course, we're really skeptical about the numbers, and we know that the health system is already a collapsed system. So ideas of collapse are, I don't know, it's everything is debatable right now. We have been under curfew for a while and under quarantine, which is different. The whole country is under curfew, meaning that you can't leave your home between 10 p.m. and 5 in the morning. And also
curfew means not on the street, not driving cars, nothing.
Exactly. You get, if you step out of your house, you get detained by the police. But there's also different regions or sections of the country have been under quarantine, meaning this city has not been under quarantine as a city. Only different municipalities within the city have been under curfew. And it's interesting phenomenon because the illness arrived here, the virus arrived here through the upper class neighborhoods, because it basically came here for people coming back from vacation in Europe. which of course not everyone goes to vacation in Europe, right? So the people who arrived here got it first, and then they passed it on to the people who work for them. So now the curfew is being ended. I mean, the quarantine is being lived in the sort of upper class neighborhoods, and they are putting under quarantine the working class neighborhoods, which means that again, all the people that got it from those rich neighborhoods are not getting it, and that's different because it's a very segregated city, and we have a whole different health system for the rich and the poor. So now we are really afraid that the working class health system is not going to be able to deal with the virus in those neighborhoods.
So it would mean, like, in New York City terms, Upper West Side could go out and no quarantine, but Queens or Brooklyn or the Bronx, there's quarantine. People are not allowed to go out. Is that true? Is that right?
Yes, exactly, and think and if in the Upper West Side everyone had private insurance, and in Queens nobody had private insurance, so they have different set of hospitals and different set of doctors for them, different sort of neighborhoods in the city.
Sorry, do you have health insurance as an artist? How's the situation among artists in Chile?
Well, it's really dire. It's the theater in Chile is always a semi-professional activity, meaning that the people who do it go to 4 years university sort of career. I mean, they study for 4 years in college to become theater artists. So when they do it professionally. They do it to the higher standards. But the reality of working in this theater is amateur, meaning that people do it mostly on the side. They have a day job and they do it during the evenings when they are free to work after their day job. So there's funding, of course, from the government, but that's not enough to sort of let people dedicate themselves fully to creating theater. So people teach, and they, of course, wait tables as they do everywhere in the world. But of course, wages are low, and there's no jobs for everyone. So people who you see on stage working professionally are usually working under the poverty line, because ticket sales, well, tickets are really inexpensive, and the wages you get from performing in theater are not a lot. So people never truly become sort of citizens in the complete sense of the word. They're always sort of marginalized and sort of pushed into sort of a working class situation in which they can't abandon. So in a way, this situation has shown that this this situation in which we find ourselves now is not much different from the one we were living before. Now we're not allowed basically to show our stuff because theaters are closed, but we were not making a lot of money then anyway. So people, the situation of theater artists hasn't changed much. I don't know if I'm being clear there.
Yeah.
It was dire before, and it's dire now. So, however, well, there's a bigger story to this, because this coronavirus crisis hit the country, Chile and Santiago, especially where most of the theater activity is, in March, late March, early April. I want to say mid-March, right? But in the context of basically a social revolution, political revolution in the country, which started in mid-October. So in mid-October, massive protests started happening all over the country, something that we had never seen before in Chile. And it was a big revolt against neoliberalism and capitalism in its neoliberal form, of course, and against the government, because once the protests began sort of taking over the streets of most cities in the country, the reaction of the government was extremely violent. Immediately, they declared a curfew, and then they brought the military out to the streets to control the population, which was really shocking because we hadn't seen that since the time of Pinochet in the 70s and 80s. So this was really sort of a nightmare come true. And the actual police began behaving in a very sort of criminal way, shooting at protesters and killing dozens, and also taking the eyes out of people's faces, right? So for some reason, we don't know exactly why, maybe they received orders, maybe they didn't, but they started shooting their guns to the heads and faces of protesters. And they took, I don't keep up with the count, but I know that more than 400 protesters have lost their eyes, and a couple of them have lost both eyes. So they aim at the head, they shoot at the head in order to take people's eyes out, mostly young people, which is really interesting because they're not killing them, but they are maiming them, right? And for us, we see that as a form of torture, because during the dictatorship, torture was really effective means of control. The protest and the political activity of the people opposing the dictatorship. And torture is it's a great sort of control scheme, I guess, because it terrorizes not only the person who's being tortured, but all the circle, right? Family and friends become immobilized. And actually, it's really hard for them to go back to protest because of the horror, the terror is so striking and runs so deep in everyone's conscience and body that you can't sort of rise again to fight. Right now, they're not allowed to do that. They do it anyway in certain police stations. But now taking out people's eyes serves that function, very similar to torture. Once a person loses their eye, it sends shockwaves of horror. And young people think twice about going outside to protest again. And of course, they can get away with it. No policeman has been sent to justice because of this kind of crime. So this started happening again in mid-October.
Just last year, October. Yeah.
Last year, yes. Actually, October the 18th. So the government behaved very criminally. They couldn't control the protest. The protest didn't stop. They set up the curfew to control the population and to let basically the police and the military roam the cities. And then the protests kept going, and they became more intense in March because here in the Southern Hemisphere we have our summer break in February. So protests didn't go away, but they just slowed down just a little bit. But when students came back to class in March, everything started sort of happening again. People taking over the subway system, people burning tires in every street corner, stopping traffic, stopping the economy, basically. Unions striking and marching towards the center of the city, like a full-blown revolution. I'm talking about March, and then this happens. The coronavirus happens. So the coronavirus stops the protests because people are not allowed to go out anymore, and they don't want to because they don't want to get the virus. So it's very sad for the protest because we were it was the one exciting thing that had happened in our country for a long time, because we were being sort of we had sort of a kind of a humiliating situation in which our country was under Pinochet, sort of the laboratory of neoliberalism, because during the 70s and 80s he had the government there had a free range to impose all the neoliberal experiment in our country, because they didn't have opposing parliament to deal with. So after that, we were basically very passive. We didn't quite rebel as a country, and that was really actually sad. We didn't in Chile have a sense of collective drive or even ambition. There was a sense of shared sadness, I guess, for being completely submitted to this horrible system. So now, basically, people were taking over the streets, and there was a sense of collective action. We're finally taking over. We're finally doing something for ourselves. And that's when the coronavirus hit. So the protest is over, and the government, which is basically ready to give up and maybe sort of to call elections or to have the president resign, they take back control, and they set up a new curfew, but not because of protest, but because of the coronavirus. So for us, it's a weird thing, because curfew, of course, we knew before from 2 months ago when we were protesting. So this is a new kind of curfew. We know, actually, we have some sort of experience on this because we were sort of trapped in our houses 2 months ago.
So in October, you had a curfew?
Yes, yes.
Tell us about that curfew.
Yeah, and now it's a new curfew. So
the same time? Was it the same time, 10 o'clock till 5?
Yes. Well, sometimes it started earlier during the protest, maybe sometimes at 7 or 8 or even at 9. It was the most strange thing, because in the summer, sun goes out at around I want to say 9:30. So when the curfew starts at 7, you're basically are trapped in your house with full daylight and during a heat wave, not able to go out. Very strange. As the military trucks crisscross the city, and military helicopters fly over your house. It's eerie, and you feel, of course, it's very dystopian. You feel like you're basically in the middle of a sort of science fiction film or something, which is something that is very common now. We all feel like some sort of fictional dystopia. I don't know, for me, it was really eerie to see the helicopters, the sound, the way they fly low in order to sort of make sure you hear the rumble, and you feel like everything shaking inside your house. It's a show of power.
Yeah.
It's a relief in a way, because you see the system showing its true colors. It's very everything becomes very clear and transparent. So in a way, it's a moment of honesty for everyone involved. Yeah. So I keep thinking about people wanting to go back to normal, but for us here, normal was a revolution. So when we say we want to go back to normal, we mean we want to go back to the normalcy of revolution, because that revolution, as complicated and difficult and bloody as it was, it was a revolution about collective action and a sense of future and even optimism.
This is it is really stunning to hear and to take that all in. And did you participate? You as a director and playwright, your work is being shown. It was at the Public Theater in New York and Berlin and so many countries around the world. And you say you still have, of course, a hard time in Santiago to be produced. But you as an artist, how were you involved in that revolution? What did you do as an artist?
Well, as much as we could, and I'm speaking collectively because, well, what happened immediately after this revolution started was that theaters closed because you couldn't go to the theater because the theater was basically, I mean, the city itself was closed. You couldn't go anywhere, and the police were everywhere. And then the curfew happened, so theaters were closed immediately. And theater artists were immediately sort of paralyzed in that there was a collective realization that it was impossible to do theater in these circumstances. Not only because it was ethically complicated to drag people into sort of this bourgeois sort of activity of being in protected closed doors, engaging in some sort of version of high culture, while outside there's revolution in which people are dying. Of course, that was impossible for us to do, even if we wanted to do some such thing. But also because the revolution had the effect of immediately challenging our way of doing theater, or aesthetic, or subject matter, everything. So I think there was a collective understanding that the only thing that we can do right now is just stop everything and go out to the streets to protest and to join the movement. There was a realization that we're not going to be opening new shows anytime soon, maybe in 6 months or a year. So we might as well engage with this and see what it does to us. And maybe we can make a play, a show, a performance piece out of this in a year from now, after we are able to digest and come up with something worthwhile. So, so basically join the protest. There's a routine in which you go every day, or you go every Friday. You join, you get, I guess the most common experience is to just breathe a lot of tear gas, cry a lot with that tear gas, realize that it's basically a chemical weapon, see the violence, engage in social media, and see every single video clip in which they show you the complete violence in which the police is engaging, the radical violence that they are using against the people. So we did this thing in which we went out, joined the protest, do whatever we could, and then go back home and spend hours on social media seeing what other people were doing and exposing ourselves to extreme violence. And when I say extreme violence, it's basically police cars, for example, not even thinking anymore about sort of keeping some sense of dignity or some sense of legality to what they were doing, and basically pressing the gas and just running their cars against the crowd and just have people sort of fly, hitting people and just having people fly in the sky, fly up after being hit by a car. So we were exposed to that with a sense of responsibility, because we can't sort of we can't look away. We have to engage by sort of engaging with the violence. It's kind of a citizen's duty to do so. And wait and think and trying to figure out if theater is possible after this. if it's possible at all.
This is amazing. The same police that executed, that state power represented and killed people, took eyes out. They are now on the street trying to manage the curfew, right? They are the same soldiers, same policemen. It's incredible, it's unimaginable. And it also puts a lot of what we experience also in perspective. How do you, as a human, as Guillermo, how do you feel at the moment? What's going on? What's going on in your mind? How do you feel?
Well, I think I feel very not creative at all. I think at some point I thought maybe this was going to be a fertile moment to just imagine theater or some sort of art for the future, something original to say about this that's going on. But soon enough, I realized that it was impossible. The fear for the future, the acknowledging the criminality of people in power all over the world is so overwhelming that I feel like I've been pushed into a corner in which I can only sort of think, trying to inform myself, to just trying to grasp, understand what's going on. But I've been sort of pushed into sort of passivity, and sort of kind of an abject passivity in which I'm completely sort of ashamed of my situation. I'm not engaging much with people. I thought there was going to be at the beginning a lot of conversations, Zoom parties every evening, but I haven't been doing that at all. I think it's a more an experience of being alone, worrying about the future and trying to imagine a future of dystopia. Not because I want it, but because I think it's always better to anticipate the worst rather than to hope for the better. I'm not always like this, but I've been sort of pushed into that extreme. So yeah, so I keep thinking about the moment in which they say, "Oh, listen, political rights, yeah, we're not doing that anymore because we're in a state of emergency. You know what, television, yeah, we're not going to be doing that anymore because we need to sort of allocate the resources to somewhere else. Supermarkets, yeah, only one, but run by the government. We're not doing supermarkets anymore. Gas, yeah, just bikes. We're doing bikes now." So I anticipate a situation in which we're going to slowly and very bored walk into sort of a state of poverty, disconnection, and a new kind of civilization that I don't know what it's going to look like. I guess that's one version of it. And the other version of it is just some sort of a uber capitalist system, even more authoritarian than the one we already know.
Do you feel your government listened at all to the street protests? Are there signs now where you feel, I mean, it was, as you said, it looked like elections would happen. Now with the corona, which is so strikingly similar to authoritarian rule imposed by an authoritarian government. But do you feel now there is perhaps some trust that could be put into the government? Is there anything where you're saying, yes, maybe something will change for the better how it is as it exists, or do you feel it is hopeless?
No, I think that they are as criminal as they were before. Criminal in a very sort of cruel way, because the same guys who were killing you actively sort of sending out people to kill the protesters are now saying, we're here to protect your health so you don't die, please stay at home. So that's very, I don't know, extreme whitewashing to the point in which it's almost laughable. But I think the changes come from the sort of a changing the people, how people see their power. For example, when this crisis started, they wanted to keep the shopping malls open, and immediately all the people who work in retail at those shopping malls, the employees, basically stepped out of their stores, and they started clapping, protesting. And that was very striking, because those retail workers never ever protest. So I think that they got from sense of encouragement from the revolution before. So in a way, that way of resisting the system was applied to what happened next, which was the coronavirus crisis. So I expect more of that for the future. And again, all the people who were protesting 5 months ago can't wait to go back to the street again. So after this coronavirus situation is over, lifted, the vaccines are arrived, whatever, people are going to be hitting the streets and protesting by the millions. So the last protest we had was International Women's Day on March 8th. I guess it was, the march happened a day before. 1.5 million people, women, marched in the streets, protesting the government and asking for justice and asking for the stopping the violence against women. So that's the strength of the movement, and that's not going to go away at all. And by the way, I should add that the movement did accomplish something, that there's going to be an election to write a new constitution. There's going to be an election to vote for or against writing a new constitution for the country. And that's a big deal. And that's happening in October. So whatever happens, well, the date was originally set for April, but now they moved it to October because of the virus. So that's happening. Whatever happens, there's going to be a new constitution in Chile, and it's going to be a very new world and a very new country. Yeah, you know how it is. You can be optimistic and pessimistic at the same time, and make that kind of your identity.
Mm-hmm. As a theater artist, with the work you put up, the work you imagined as a symbolic way, as a way of a real way on stage, as portraying the world, but perhaps also with the call to change it, as Milo Rao said, that what you and others are doing now. Do you feel the revolution, but perhaps also the corona now, is something changing inside your thinking about your practice? Or do you feel that Thomas Ostermeier says, I feel I'm just hit by a bus. I can't really put it into words. But do you feel there's an adjustment, that things might be approached differently when this is over? And it will be over. Nothing lasts forever. So for the good or for the bad, but this will be over. Yeah. Is there something that
something really interesting happened, because I was doing with a lot of people my generation and younger, we were doing these political plays for a long time in Chile. We're sort of foreshadowing the revolution,
yeah, to
the point in which we were becoming boring, right? Because we're repeating this message over and over again. The sky's going to fall down on us. This system is completely unfair. We have no justice. We are under a dictatorship under other name. We were going on and on and on about this. Some people were maybe saying with some sort of a justification, why didn't you stop it? Move on to some other subject matter, because that's old news. The country moved on, and we would never shut up. And we became even more radicalized as we as years went by. And then this revolution happens. We were sort of vindicated in a way, but revolution immediately stole our thunder, because it was so big and it was so such a popular movement that our theater became immediately old, because we were seeing the future and sort of again announcing the revolution. But once the revolution arrives, you can't see the future anymore. You become part of the past, the people who announced it, but we are not foreseeing anything. And I'm talking about our subject matter and also about our aesthetic as well. So we're completely stunned. Yeah, a big buzz hit us, but at least we had the revolution, and the revolution had like a sort of beautiful artistic component. People doing graphic arts were just covering the city in sort of the most beautiful art, graffiti that you've ever seen. There were performances everywhere. There was music on the streets. It was just beautiful. But we were stunned anyway. And then something really interesting happened, which was that a feminist group from Valparaiso called Las Tesis created a piece of performance called El Violador Eres Tú, or The Rapist Is You, which is something that was performed by a group of, I want to say, 100 women, 200 women on the streets everywhere. And the performance was so successful that it was repeated all over the world, including in New York City and most cities in the US and Europe. But I'm talking about everywhere in the world. And this was a piece of performance art. Basically, it was a dance in which I can't really do it right now, but it's basically, I wouldn't know how to do it, but it's basically they repeat a little speech with some sort of sing song as they move their arms and legs, representing different situations of oppression, and then sort of fighting back against authority. I'm talking about the way they use their body. But it's one of those sort of short dance pieces that you can learn rather easily and that you can do on the streets. And it's for women, right? For women to perform as a group. And this was really interesting because, as they explained later, this group made out of women, they were preparing a play in which they were going to use this little choreography. But then, since the revolution started, they couldn't do it. So they took that little choreography to the street. And then it caught fire, and then it was done by people all over the country and then all over the world. And it has a very sort of strong political content, because they are accusing men of actually being the rapist, but not only men, but the state with capital letters, and the police of being the actual rapist. Not only in the sense of the actual rape, but also in the sense of sort of raping society as a whole with oppression. And this was done collectively. It's incredibly strong, it's incredibly catchy, it's incredibly beautiful, and it's incredibly theatrical. And once we saw that, we saw the theater of the future. This is it. This is what we were sort of hoping for. This is here to stay theater, right? A theater that doesn't happen inside our conventional theaters. It's for everyone to be done. It has a striking political statement, and it's done by the people, and it's beautiful, and it's joyful, and it's political, and it's done by women. So it was basically the most hopeful and beautiful thing that I've seen coming out of this. So I think I saw the future is maybe not done by me. Maybe my role is to go back to my old ways and trying to find a way from there. But at least I know that some people are taking over in the most creative and beautiful way, a more interesting way. So again, that thing is now dormant, but I expect it to come back.
Mm-hmm. Looking back, I mean, you did the great piece Villa about the villa where the Museum of Torture, you know, what form it should take. It's a wonderful discussion on how to think and how to think about things at a different perspective. But also then you did Neva, where actually actors were rehearsing Chekhov had died, a revolution is on the street. But a play like Neva, where it deals with revolution, could you write that again right now, or do you feel something is different?
Yeah, something is different because the inspiration for Neva was a problem with the ethics of doing theater, something that I've talked about this here before. In a country so violent and so with so much inequality and oppression as Chile, it's really difficult to get away with charging a lot of money and doing a play inside a beautiful theater. Every aesthetic sort of preoccupation or concern, or maybe engaging in this collective act of going to the theater to some sort of cultural enjoyment, it's rather shameful, or could become rather shameful. So I wrote a metaphorical play, Neva, in which Chekhov's widow, Olga Kniper, was basically rehearsing a play while outside the Tsar was killing people during the 1905 revolution in St. Petersburg. So just to again to play with this idea of performing something while outside people are being killed, and the play was really successful for me as a writer and director, because I think I engaged the subject in the way that I wanted to. But for that to happen, for that idea to sort of work, theater has to be happening. So when I did this play, theater was actually happening. People were sort of going to the theater and filling the seats of the house, right? Now there's no theater. So there's no bourgeois theater getting away with an aesthetic concern and ignoring what's going on in the streets. So I guess now the equivalent of this completely sort of bourgeois engaging with sort of a escapist art or duty is, I guess, staying at home and watching I don't know, television or quality television, which I guess it would be a little bit unfair, because it's not like we have a lot of options other than that. But I guess a play like that has lost traction because of the fact that we actually don't have theater now, and we won't have for a while.
How do you spend your day? Tell us a bit. How do you, when you get up, what do you do now as a writer, such a brilliant mind and director, and then you went through the revolution where theaters were closed. Now it's closed again. There's curfew. So how do you pass a day?
Well, most of the day is taking care of a toddler. That's it. I take care of the toddler all day, and then at night I have 2 hours for myself, in which I basically check the internet and try to write a little bit. And then my mind completely goes, and then I have time for some email, and that's it. I'm not watching movies, I'm not reading, I'm not doing anything other than sort of reading the news, reading what's going on with the pandemic, and trying to catch hopeful news about the possibility of a treatment or a vaccine. And I have tried to catch bits of the Schaubühne shows that they are putting up on their website.
Mm-hmm.
That has been my biggest sort of moment of pleasure. And I am teaching a couple of classes in the university. I'm teaching a class in theater directing, and also a class, a writing class. Writing class is, I think, more tolerable, but the situation of teaching over a screen is, it's fine. I mean, people are willing to make it work, but it can last, I don't know, 30 minutes. After 30 minutes, you start losing your engagement and your concentration. So it's not truly productive. And I think the same, and the directing class is just, well, I don't know, I think it's underwhelming because, of course, a practical class, you have to be actually engaging with students and directing on stage and making them direct on stage. Of course, mostly discussing theater and discussing film, but we're not doing much directing. We have tried to direct over Skype a little bit, which feels current because a lot of people are doing performance, even plays on Skype and Zoom.
What do you think about that, doing plays and performances on Skype and Zoom?
Well, I guess people have been doing it here really successfully, I guess. So they did a couple in which they sold 1,000 tickets for one, and then 500 tickets for the other one, which is unprecedented. And they were charging, I want to say, $5, which is a lot of money. So it was successful, and people are seeing this as a sort of a fine alternative to not working. And some people are even looking into developing this online play thing as exploring possibilities for it, right? Maybe the sort of a Zoom conversation is just the first stage, and maybe they're going to come up with something really interesting. I'm not interested in that myself. I'd rather do radio plays or something like that. But my criticism is that the people who are succeeding on this are people who were already well known and really well established. So people who are already famous maybe are people who can sort of invite a lot of ticket sales. They can get a lot of ticket sales because they are already famous. So in a way, the people who were already well positioned in society, in theater, are getting the most out of this movement. And the people who were doing theater struggling and are not really well known are not going to get much economic reward out of this. So I think it's going to play out. I think it's in my case, I can't engage again more than 30 minutes with the screen. So I think it might get old pretty soon, but I'm not going to say bad things about it because I don't want to stop sort of legitimate sort of things that theater artists might be exploring for artistic reasons and economic reasons.
So when you write in those 2 hours, at what time is it, and what do you write about?
Well, I have assignments. I'm writing for film and television. So
you did the Pablo Neruda screenplay, right? This is your latest film.
Yes.
So you write on commissions at the moment.
Yes, and I'm writing a script for myself because I want to direct a film in the near future, whenever this comes back, if it does. And I want to develop another play with my company because in my company, everyone is going a little bit crazy right now for obvious reasons. You can do so much yoga online before it gets not fun anymore. So we're putting together a play, which is going to be a sequel to a play we did before, which is called Mateluna. We did a play in which we are basically trying to free a friend of us who is in prison right now, and this is reality. So we did a play to try to convinced the authorities to give him um, to release him, to basically to start a new sort of trial, or maybe get a sort of a pardon from the government. We have failed so far with the first play we did in collaboration with How Theater in Berlin. It's a international production called Mateluna, which is the last name of this friend of ours who is in prison right now. And now we're doing a new play about him because we really, really want to release him. He has called me a couple of times from prison. He's very scared because he is, of course, in a sort of very dangerous situation because as we know, prisons have been completely devastated by this virus. So he's very afraid that he's going to get it. And also, in Chile at least, prisoners have been staging riots inside prisons to be released or to have access to some sort of medical care. So he's afraid that he's going to get involved in some sort of riot, and then he might get the virus as well. So he has called me twice in the last month, I guess. And we're doing another play for him in order to release him. This is for us as well, and we don't know what form it's going to take. Maybe we're going to film it and maybe show it online if we need to show it before this situation is over. So that's part of the work. But that's at this stage is more meeting than writing.
Do you feel in Chile kind of, how is the situation? Do you feel isolated? Are you contacts to Latin American colleagues in other countries or to Europe or America? Do you feel people pay attention to this situation?
Yes. Before this I mean, during the revolution, I got a lot of emails and a lot of attention from other people. There was a theater festival here. A lot of people came to see the protests and to see the theater. And I gave a couple of interviews to international websites, including HowlRound, telling about the situation in Chile. And a lot of friends wrote to just find out what was going on. There was a lot of concern. And I was really pleased by that. And I realized how connected we all are. But now that we all have the coronavirus and we're going through the same situation, I realized that there's a situation in which one doesn't have to explain anything to anyone, because this situation has unified in such a way, unified us all in such a way that we don't need to explain to each other anymore what's going on. So I've been talking with friends in Europe, and we don't even talk about the virus. We go immediately into personal stuff or other stuff, because we don't need to tell each other, yeah, I've been at home trapped for 6 days. Today I'm going to take a walk. I don't have food, or I've been eating too much. I can't watch TV anymore. It's making me sick. You know, that kind of conversation is just taken for granted because we're all going through the same. So we just go into sort of a more real stuff. And also, I guess we try to keep up a sense of humor as well, because it's basically the only thing we have left. So we might as well use it.
Yeah. This is incredible. I hope that one day you will actually get your own theater, have your own building, and that you can work in a good way, that there's support for the artists. I mean, you say you work with students, you teach in this moment now. What do you tell the artists, and what do you tell your friends? What is advice how to get through this, or what to keep in mind?
Well, I tell them two things. One, that we already experienced the death of theater in Chile, because after the coup happened in 1973, there was a curfew for years, and theater was basically killed. And for some reason, theater survived, and then it became a thing, mostly through street performance in the 80s, and then it became a big thing in the mid 80s and the 90s. And theater came back, and it did wonderful, beautiful things. So theater has a way of surviving the most dire sort of situation. So I basically, when I talk to people who are in their early 20s or even younger than that, that they're going to go through the death of theater, and they are going to revive it themselves. And they're going to be talking about the revolution and about the coronavirus for 40 years in their theater. And it's going to transform it completely. And it's going to be born from them. Because for me, there's going to be a before and after this crisis, but for them, it's going to be the starting point. And that theater is going to look completely different. It's going to be awe-inspiring, and it's going to be beautiful. But it's only them are going to be able to do it. So basically, I guess I'm terrorizing them with assigning them a lot of responsibility. You know, basically, you're the ones who are going to save the world. They're going to save theater by inventing it again. But I believe it. I mean, I know, I hope I have a role myself in that sort of rebirth. But I think ultimately it's going to be the role of people who are starting riding this wave.
And so if I understand this, you cannot read anything at the moment, but if you do read, what do you read? Do you listen to something? Is there something where you connected to, which you perhaps even knew before, but now it's kind of a different, or something new?
Well, this is the thing. So I told you about my toddler situation. So before this, I wasn't engaged with television at all, and I didn't let my kid watch screens at all. But since we're trapped now, we are, in order to save our sanity, we're turning on the computer and watching I don't know, those videos for kids. And I've been engaging with television for children, and it's just the most wonderful thing. I thought it was just violence and horrible stuff, but it's just beautifully done and a pure joy. So I've been enjoying that. Really, this is new, and that's giving me a lot of optimism, I guess, and respect for that sort of creation. I've been following closely the U.S. elections, primaries, and what's going on there, which is a spectacle in itself. It's terrifying. So that's of course, I read the usual, the expected stuff, like, I don't know, Jacobin and current affairs, and sometimes the paper of record. But I keep very engaged with what's going on in the U.S., politically speaking, and that gives me a sense of doom, but also a sense of sort of reality, being actually living in reality. And I am also I am listening to a lot of electronic music, abstract electronic music from the 60s and 70s. I think there's a sense of beauty in that sort of abstraction, and also there's a numbing quality, I guess, because it is so overwhelming and so strange and so different from everything, that it sort of has the quality of quieting your mind in a way that no meditation has able to do for me yet. So I guess that's my work music and my meditation music as well. So yeah, that's my cultural consumption, I guess. And of course, no cable, no television, and no no broadcast news at all.
Incredible.
For my
incredible.
own sanity.
That you also switch between children's television and the ultra-violent images from the revolution. You listened, I guess, Brian Eno and work like this, who said his music is as ignorable as it is interesting, and that it balances it out. And and it is, yeah. So Guillermo, really, you are one of the artists where we do say why we need to hear about it. Artists who've been on the right side of history, right side of progressive justice, and on the right side of also what's right. And it's also you put your body into the work, as Pasolini said. We all should be throwing our bodies into the lives. When you stop doing theater, but we're participating in the revolution, and really we all think about you. You're part of our big global theater community, and your work is extremely important. And please do know that Chile has been on the minds for many reasons of everyone. To our audience, I hope you will be able to listen in also next week. As I said, as far as we know, we are the only theater institution in New York and in the US, perhaps also in Europe, who produces a new meaningful content every day. And just hearing from Guillermo, it just shows why it is important that we hear and listen to these voices. We have also significant artists as Guillermo. For next week, we have the great Rimini company. Stefan Daniel and Helgard will be with us. Guy Regis Jr. from Haiti will talk about the situation there. Jalila Bakar from Tunisia, who's a great leader, one of the most successful, maybe most significant writers in the Arab world. Peter Sellers will also join us, and we'll talk about his work and life and how he gives meaning. And then we have Oscar Eustace, who runs the Great Public Theater, where you also did your work, and Tony Thorne, who runs this tiny small theater out of his home, from his father. Beautiful space. So they both will give us views for what's happening in New York City and their take on it. So can really thank you listeners for taking time. I know how busy these days are and how much content is out there and everything, but I think for artists also like Guillermo, it's good to know that people are listening, that we care. And then we have more questions that will keep with us. Again, Guillermo, thank you for coming on our Segal Talks. Thanks to HowlRound at Emerson College in Boston for hosting us here, and Vijay and Travis and the Segal team, May and Sun Yang and Jackie and Andy who came on. So thank you all, and I hope to hear from you all soon again in Chile, and I hope Guillermo will be back in New York, or one day I'll come and visit. So all my best, and really all my best wishes. You stay healthy and continue to do the good work. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. I'm thinking about New York City.
Good. And everybody out there, stay